Hello, art history, and welcome to the last essay walkthrough video that I am going to make before your exam tomorrow. I hope you find this useful simply for reviewing artworks, but also for preparing for what the essays are going to look like. So let's go ahead and look at the artwork. Now, this question I took directly from one of the examples that was given to us for the 2020 exam. And this is for the 15-minute continuity and change essay. All right, so I think we can expect that this question, you have 15 minutes to answer it and 5 minutes to upload it. That question is going to look like this with the A, B, and C. And it's going to be relatively straightforward, okay? So I actually added the This Is Woman Holding a Balance by Vermeer from about 1664. That was not included on the original question, but that is something I added. But the idea is that you are going to recognize the artwork from our image set, and we'll be able to talk about how it demonstrates continuity and departs from artistic traditions. So I am going to talk through my answers to what it asked, the tasks, and I will also include some other things that you could have talked about based on the review session that College Board did for this question. Okay, so first let's just go through the question. So first, we'll have to, using two examples of specific visual evidence, explain how this work demonstrates continuity with established artistic traditions. Then, using two examples of specific visual evidence, explain how this work demonstrates change from earlier artistic traditions. And finally, using two examples of specific contextual evidence, explain why this work deviates from established artistic traditions. All right, so two examples, and explaining. And I would like to just remind you that visual evidence is what we can see, contextual evidence is what we know. So make sure that you're really clear on that when you are answering these questions. All right. So for the first task, for A, how does this work demonstrate continuity with established artistic traditions? So I think I take a little issue with this question because it is a little vague. It doesn't exactly specify which artistic traditions or like which time period of artistic traditions, because I interpreted it rather broadly. But I think in some instances, or at least the way they did it, the College Board review, is they interpreted it a little more tightly focused on the 17th century. But I was thinking about, oh, how does this continue the general Western tradition of painting that was established in the Renaissance? And for that, I was thinking, well, it still shows us a three-dimensional space on a two-dimensional plane. And how is he doing that? How is Vermeer doing that? Well, he uses linear perspective to create that sense of dimension within the space. The orthogonals of the room meet at her pinky finger, which is the vanishing point. And so if you follow like the tilt of her head or the orthogonals from the corners of the mirror over here, they all converge right around here. Even I think if I'm following not this line so much as this corner, the diagonal that is created there, even the corners right here, all right? Even the figure of Christ back here is on this diagonal, that it's all moving down towards her pinky finger. And linear perspective is a technique that was begun in the Renaissance and continued. I also talked about the modulation of light and shadow that is used in this painting to depict space. We see that in her clothes, the folds of her skirt here, and her jacket, even on the cap over here, and then plus the way the light falls on the drapery over here, or even how we see it falling through the window here, and how it's really bright right there, but then it slowly modulates brighter and brighter. So he really masterfully shows us the depth of this space using light and shadow. Okay. Some other things you could talk about is that the small details that he uses to create this realistic space, the fact that he's using oil paint is very typical, especially of Northern Europe. That's where oil paint began, really. And like I said, we talked about the textures and lighting effects. The review also mentioned that it fits in with the genre painting of Northern Europe, and it does. But I also think that to some extent I thought of it as departing from artistic traditions because genre scenes are something that's very unique to Northern Europe as opposed to the rest of Europe. And so we'll talk about that. All right? And so let's actually get there. So because we have to talk about how this work demonstrates change. And a big part of that is the secular subject matter. This is not a picture of a story from the Bible or a saint's life or the life of Christ. It's not something out of ancient history or even contemporary history or contemporary events. It's not a painting of a battle or anything like that. It doesn't tell us a myth like a lot of Italian Renaissance paintings might have done. So it's not religious, it's not mythological, it's not a portrait of anyone in particular. It's not a rich person who's having their portrait painted for posterity or anything like that. It is a genre scene. It is a scene of everyday life. And now this fits into the tradition because that was a Northern European tradition, but that tradition is unique from the rest of Europe. And so the fact that it is just, quote unquote, just a woman holding a balance, and we don't know who this woman is. She seems to be an individual person, but who she is, we don't know, and that isn't the point here. I also talked about the fact that while symbolism had long had its place in religious artworks, and we've seen this in quite a few artworks that we have looked at, including Northern European ones, when we looked at the Annunciation altarpiece, the Marode altarpiece, the one that folds up. It has the lily and the vessel and the cloth and all of in the tiny baby Jesus on 7 rays of light. Like, we have all of these religious symbols in there, and I think it's very clear that all of those things mean something. But now that symbolism that we often associate with religious painting or mythological painting has been transposed into a secular painting. And so it adds this extra layer of meaning to these paintings so that it is, in the end, not just a painting about a woman holding a balance, but it has something more to it. That balance isn't just a balance. It's related to the picture of the Last Judgment behind her. And so we get the sense that this is about judgment and weighing something. Okay? The mirror over here, there's a lot of varied interpretations about that mirror, but it could suggest self-knowledge or reflection. All right? This mirror is not just reflecting her image, but it is reflecting her inner self. Okay, and so this symbolism adds that extra layer of meaning to the painting so that it's not just a woman holding a balance. And I think that's really important because, or that is really different than what we have seen before, or what we see in France or Italy, or something like that. Okay. Other things you could talk about that are different. It is a very small painting, and so that suggests it was made for private viewing. This kind of goes with the secular subject matter, but it's a middle-class woman. It's not a wealthy lady, okay? And the other thing is, and this is specific to the 17th century and what other artists were doing elsewhere in 17th century Europe. So the light here is extremely naturalistic, like I talked about, as opposed to, for example, Caravaggio is doing really dramatic lighting effects with strong contrasts of light and dark. In the Renaissance, we often saw very even lighting across the whole canvas. But here we have these very subtle tones of shadow and as they move into light. And that is extremely naturalistic and something that Vermeer particularly was quite good at. All right. So we have these differences, but why do we have these differences? What is it about the Netherlands that made these differences happen? And you really, in this instance, you really have to talk about two things: the middle class and the fact that the Netherlands was a Protestant country. Okay, so first, the Netherlands is a Protestant country, and therefore the church, as we understand it, like the Catholic Church, the Pope, priests, cardinals, they have like no power, almost no power. The churches aren't filled with art because Protestants are sort of suspicious of religious art because it can lead to idolatry. And so they don't have that art in their churches, so there's not a demand for that art. Okay? And instead, the demand shifts from the church and like the king and the aristocracy to the wealthy middle class that developed in the Netherlands because of its commercialism. The Netherlands was a center of trade for Europe. It was the first place where something like a stock market developed, and so a lot of people are making a lot of money in sort of a new, sort of more modern way, rather than like from farming or the land, or they're inheriting it. They're making it on the market through buying and selling goods. And these people want to buy art for their houses. And yes, they might, in some instances, want some religious paintings, maybe, but also they want paintings of their life, their objects that they can afford. And so a wealth of new subjects is sort of created in the Netherlands. There's landscapes, there's these genre paintings, there's seascapes and still lifes, flower paintings, a whole new wealth of things, so that these wealthy people wanted to buy and put in their homes. Okay, because and even it's even the same today. Like even if we're just buying a print, we want to buy a print of a pretty flower or something like that. Okay, and so understanding that this is the context of the Netherlands allows for artists to create this new sort of subject matter. But also I think we could talk about how that embedded symbolism that I talked about, the balance is not just a balance since it's related to the Last Judgment, it has something to do with weighing your soul, that there's this suggestion of the desire for these Protestant middle class patrons to imbue their lives with spiritual meaning. So there's this tension between the wealth that they are making and their own religious beliefs, and that tension is in their paintings as well. Okay. So I know that's a lot to talk about, and what seems, I mean, it is a relatively straightforward question. When they say established art, if you get just basic established artistic traditions, just do the best you can. I interpreted it really broadly, and I think in this case they were maybe looking for something slightly more specific and tight to the 17th century, but I wouldn't worry about it too much, okay? All right. That was the last continuity and change essay. And if you have any questions about it, please let me know. I hope this helps you as you prepare for the exam tomorrow. I know it's super stressful, but I also know that you are totally capable of being really successful on this exam. So that is all from me right now. I will talk to you soon.